The night pressed in thick and slow, as if the walls themselves drank in sound and held their breath. It was always quiet in my duplex after midnight, quieter than any place had a right to be, even in my old, echoing neighborhood. I spent too many nights awake, watching slivers of city light stretch across the ceiling, wondering why sleep never seemed interested in me. The house settled in its bones, the floorboard sighed, and my mind drifted toward nowhere in particular. Sometimes I listened for voices outside, the distant rumble of cars or the rhythm of footsteps on the sidewalk, but it was always just me and the usual silence, heavy and complete. That night, though, the silence grew different. Off balance. I sat on the edge of my bed, restless, picking at a peeling spot on the old, painted window frame as the city lights flickered far away. There was no wind, no hum from the neighbor's television, just the slow tick of the clock. I remember glancing at the glowing numbers. 12:14 a.m. A thin chill crawled from the floor, up through the bedsheet, and settled between my shoulder blades. The hallway outside my bedroom stretched away into familiar gloom, narrow and pinched with darkness. I tried to count breaths. 1, 2, 3. Easy ways to trick myself into drifting off. My eyelids wavered, caught somewhere between sleep and waking. And then, through that heavy stillness, a sound split the air, soft, almost careful. It was a voice, high and gentle, floating just out of sight. A child's voice. It came from the hallway, not loud but impossible to ignore. Will you come out now? Will you come out now? Will you come out now? Each word was spaced, like a slow chant, spoken as though I already knew the answer. My heart coughed in my chest, and I waited, thinking maybe I imagined it. Old houses made strangers of sound. But the words repeated, inching closer this time, dragging a cold curiosity out of me. I glanced at the clock. 12:17 a.m., blinking steady, as if marking not just the time but a kind of appointment. Nerves prickled under my skin. I slid off the bed and pulled on a t-shirt, creeping across the thin rug that never quite covered the creaky floorboards. The hallway yawned open in front of me, the darkness lined with the faint edge of moonlight slipping past tired curtains. I hesitated, breaths shallow, forcing my feet to move. I reached for the light switch but paused. Something in me didn't want to break the darkness, didn't want to give this moment a shape that light might misunderstand. I listened. The voice carried on, exact as a record skipping, will you come out now? Will you come out now? Will you come out now? I stepped into the hallway barefoot, the floor biting cold. Every sound, the shift of the floor, the catch of my breath, seemed too loud, as if I might disturb something waiting. My neighbors below were silent, their apartment a tomb beneath mine. A thin draft curled around my ankles, the air dense with the untouched smell of dust and hallway paint. There was no one there. At least, no one I could see. I moved toward where the hardwood floor warped a little, just by the linen closet. The hallway stretched ahead, ending in a shadowy knot near the closed bathroom door. I could hear the voice, unbroken and near, impossibly clear although the space was empty. The words never changed, will you come out now? Will you come out now? Will you come out now? I tried the closet door. It opened with a sigh. The shelves were empty but for some forgotten towels and a bottle of cleaner, nothing that could hide anyone, let alone a child. My hands shook despite themselves. I forced myself to check the bathroom, flicking the switch. White glare splashed across cracked tiles. The room was empty, the mirror flat and unforgiving. The voice continued from the hallway, the same phrase, never once breaking or slipping, each repetition perfectly matched to the last. Standing there, halfway between rooms, I wondered about pipes, about tricks of old buildings shifting at night. The cold stayed with me, thick in my chest. I went to the living room next, opening heavy curtains to check the street. The city outside was deserted, no lingering people, no signs of a wandering child. The windows were locked, old screens dust blind. If there had been an echo, or even a prank, I couldn't see how anyone could have gotten in. The voice did not follow me into the room, it lingered in the hallway, obedient to some boundary I couldn't see. I swallowed hard and went back, phone already in my hand. I opened the recording app, letting the red dot glow against my thumb. I held it out over the empty hallway, heart thumping. The voice didn't change. It stayed steady, the tone balancing somewhere gentle and insistent, just loud enough to fill the dark spaces and leave the words hanging inside me. Will you come out now? Will you come out now? Will you come out now? I looked for vents along the floor, checked behind the old heating grate, ran my fingertips along the cracked line where paint met wall. Nothing. I tried to convince myself it was a neighbor's TV, a strange trick of acoustics, something simple and harmless. But as I moved from spot to spot, the voice remained always just ahead of me, never farther, never closer, and always alone. No footsteps. No childish giggle or scurry. Just the voice, like a recording on endless loop. Eventually, I stopped the recorder. I told myself that was enough. My mind was tired, strung thin by sleep deprivation and nerves. I mumbled into the dark, feeling a kind of hollow embarrassment for letting the house get to me. I slipped back into my bedroom, shutting the door and sitting down hard on the mattress. Even here, separated by a thin plank of wood, I could feel that voice pressing in. The words worked their way under my skin, as if I was expected to do something, respond in some way I didn't understand. I listened to the recording, holding the phone up close. There wasn't just the child's voice, spaced and gentle, but something else, a faint hush, almost like breathing, woven underneath. I told myself it was probably the wind or maybe my own breath. I let the recording play once, twice. Each time, the phrase was the same, the small voice unchanging, will you come out now? When I finally set the phone down, I checked the time again. Nearly 1 o'clock. The voice had stopped at some point, fading away without me noticing the exact moment it left. The hallway was silent again, but the emptiness felt strange, as if the walls waited for something more. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the plaster with my eyes. My mind circled itself, restless, not wanting to believe but refusing to let go. Had I been dreaming while awake? Hearing things born of loneliness and late nights? The city outside felt distant, my apartment sealed tight from the world, as though nothing could get in and nothing could ever leave. I thought of all the hours I'd spent wishing for sleep, how quickly I would trade quiet for the comfort of simple, undisturbed darkness. But now, the silence itself seemed more threatening than any sound. I left the hallway light off and tried to gather what comfort I could from the blanket, but still I felt watched, as though something waited just beyond the door, repeating its invitation. I tried to convince myself it would not happen again, that in the relentless light of morning, I would see the absurdity of the whole thing. Dreams have a way of borrowing voices, I told myself. Empty houses are greedy for echoes. The words, though, stayed wound tight in my thoughts, pulling at sleep, tugging me toward uneasy dreams. As the night edged toward morning, I drifted at last into a shallow, restless sleep, the shape of the hallway pressing at my memory. In the distance, so deep in the quiet that I could almost believe I imagined it, I thought I heard the faintest trace of a gentle, patient child's voice, waiting for someone to answer. The first thing I did when I woke up the next morning was check the hallway. Groggy and unsettled, with the image of that glowing clock still stinging somewhere behind my eyes, I stepped out of bed and wrapped myself in the old sweater draped across the footboard. My body felt heavier than usual. It was as if sleep, what little of it I managed, hung around my shoulders like a wet blanket. I opened my door slowly, half expecting to see something standing just a few feet away, but the hallway was clear, stretching out ahead of me in its usual gloomy lines. It was silent, too. I steadied my breathing and padded quietly toward the kitchen, trailing my fingertips along the faded wallpaper, searching for any trace of something out of place from the night before. Nothing. Just my own soft footsteps and the smell of coffee grounds still clinging to the air. Most days, the memories of my insomnia fade fast, but that morning, it was as if the air itself remembered the night before. All day I felt watched. I kept hearing faint, muffled noises, creaks, almost like footsteps, or the sound of something plastic clinking against the baseboard. More than once I went out to run errands or take a long walk just to clear my head, but the uneasiness clung tight. I touched my phone, wanting to play back the voice I'd recorded during the night. At first, though, I stopped myself. I was afraid of what I might hear, or might not. That night I lay in bed reading, eyes moving over the same sentence until the words lost their shape. I watched the numbers shift on the clock with a building, pointless tension. 12:15, the floorboard beneath my dresser creaked, and I pressed my palm quietly against the wall, feeling for vibrations. I told myself it was the pipes, the house settling, the way old buildings always complain at night. I let out a shaky breath and glanced down the hallway, where darkness pressed up to the door like a held-in sigh. At 12:17 exactly, the voice returned. It was louder this time. I heard the words slip out through the walls, just on the other side of the closed bedroom door, so clear they almost sounded like they were inside my room. "Will you come out and play now? I'm still waiting. I've been waiting all night." I froze, gripping the book with white knuckles. The voice was higher and sharper than last night, something a little more insistent, more rehearsed. The words changed, but only slightly. The cadence was exactly the same. I lay still in the hush, waiting to hear footsteps or some sound of movement, but instead there was only that impossibly even, repetitive speech, and a steady, growing cold seeping through the cracks around my doorframe. Goosebumps ran up my arms. I shivered, pulling the collar of my sweater tighter. The house itself felt like it was listening, waiting, holding its breath alongside me. My throat was dry, but I managed to call out a quiet, "Who's there?" The voice didn't answer. It started again, almost immediately, same phrases, the same eerie rhythm. "Will you come out and play now? I've been waiting all night." My heart hammered. I fumbled with my phone and opened up the recorder app, hands trembling, but the hallway remained just as quiet outside the door. I listened for breathing, for laughter, anything that sounded like a child. Nothing. I let the recording run and waited, forcing myself to open the door. The hallway stretched out in shadow, longer than it should have looked, with every groove in the wood repeating softly, all the way to the dim bulb at the far end. My slippers made a faint hush on the worn runner as I stepped out, whispering, "Hello," again. The voice didn't come from any one place. It felt like it was around me, echoing from the walls, maybe even underneath the floor. The air was freezing. My breath made small clouds in front of me, and the hair on my arms bristled as I inched forward. I reached the middle of the hallway, right where the light pooled in a weak circle. Looking down, I noticed something strange, wedged between the floorboards, a small, red plastic block. It hadn't been there yesterday. I stooped down to touch it. It was cold, too cold for something that should have been in the house. I turned it over in my hand, feeling all the familiar bumps. It looked like one of those old blocks, the kind kids used to build towers. I didn't have any toys or blocks in the house, no reason for them to be here. My hand shook. I just stood there, staring at the block on my palm, listening for the child's voice. "Please, come and play. Just for a little while." I tried again. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely more than a hiss, as if I was afraid the house would overhear. Nothing replied. The words started over, exactly the same as before. I checked all the doors, the coat closet, the bathroom, the old guest room at the end of the hall, all locked or empty, boxes undisturbed. Moonlight splashed uneven rectangles across the floor. The hallway looked even longer now, impossibly so, with each segment of light and shadow stretching away from me in repetition, as if I'd become stuck in a corridor that looped back on itself over and over. I pressed my back to the wall and tried to breathe quietly. I knew I should have been afraid, but mostly I felt numb, as if something heavy and slow were crawling up from the walls. I considered that I might be sleepwalking, or that my lack of rest was making me hallucinate. I stamped down the rising dread, told myself I would find a logical explanation in the morning. Maybe I'd brought something home and just forgot. Maybe the neighbors had a visitor and the noise carried through the walls. Maybe. Still shaking, I slipped the block into my pocket and turned back to my room. The air was darker and colder now, the shadows more crowded, like they were overlapping. My steps sounded like someone else's beside me. For a long time, I stood in the doorway to my room, hand on the knob, afraid to look back down the hall. The voice had stopped. Silence returned heavily, like the house was sucking all the sound out of the air. I sat on my bed and reached for my phone, playing back the recording in hope, maybe dread. But when I pressed play, there was nothing. Just the hiss of dead air, the vague hum of the old fridge in the kitchen, and, far in the background, the tap of my own footsteps. No child's voice. No message. The timeline was clean. As if the voice only existed in my head or in the thin, cold spaces between things I could explain. I stayed awake, waiting for dawn. At some point, my tiredness overtook my fear. I let my arm slip down, feeling the rim of my pocket with its small, plastic weight. My dreams were shallow and gray, filled with turning doorknobs and endless hallways. When I woke, the city was still and pale, and the block was still there, as cold as the night before. Throughout the next day, the house never quite warmed up. No matter how many layers I wore or how much tea I drank, there was this chill that worked its way through the floors. I found myself touching that red block over and over, turning it in my hands as if it would warm up with enough contact. Later, as I walked down the hallway for some water, I noticed something else, a tiny blue marble sitting just beneath the radiator. It wasn't dusty. It looked newly placed, waiting to be discovered. My stomach twisted. I sat on the cold floorboards, turning the marble in one hand, the block in the other. Both of them were too cold, too perfectly clean for this old place. That night, I propped my phone on a chair by the door and set it to record long before midnight. This time, I was determined to catch the voice, to prove to myself that something, or someone, was truly there. Maybe it was just my mind, split open by exhaustion and a house too full of empty space. Or maybe the duplex wanted someone to talk to, the way the child's voice seemed to move through the boards and wires, echoing back the loneliness of a place too quiet for too long. By the time the clock inched toward midnight, I was wide awake, the chill setting into my bones, toys lined up next to my bed. I waited for the voice as the numbers flicked over, and the city outside seemed to fall silent, as if it too was waiting, listening for that familiar, ritual call from the dark. I spent the hours before midnight moving through my rooms, double-checking the locks, switching on every lamp. The duplex was a patchwork of old wood and faded brass, every edge holding a whisper of someone else's life before mine. The glow from the lamps barely reached the dark corners, but I told myself it was enough. I kept the hallway empty, no shoes, no laundry basket, not even the spare umbrella I liked to leave by the door. The air felt tense, stiff with a nervousness that buzzed against my skin. I ate a late supper at the kitchen counter and let the dishes pile up in the sink. That small carelessness would have bothered me, normally. Tonight, all I could think about was 12:17, as if my body was a clock wound tight to that moment. I tried to read, then scrolled through the news, but my mind drifted back to the sound from last night. The way the child's voice echoed, soft and certain. Always at the same time, each word falling in just the same way. Not the noise of a real child, or anything alive. I wondered what my neighbors would think if I asked whether they'd heard it too. I didn't want to know. By midnight, I'd convinced myself that I'd imagined it all. Just a ripple of sleep deprivation, or old pipes rattling in the walls, playing tricks on my mind. But as the digital clock crawled closer to 12:17, I sat perfectly still at my kitchen table, the hush around me so thick that even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fade. My hand trembled as I wrapped it around my mug. The tea had gone cold an hour ago. At exactly 12:17, the hallway began to change. At first, nothing moved. Not the shadows, not the air. But then, the voice returned. This time, not soft or distant, but pleading. The words pressed at the edges of my hearing, urgent and desperate, the way a child might beg for someone to listen. Please, let me in. Please. I'm scared. It's so dark. It was the same shape of speech as the nights before, but now sharper, more aware. Not just repeating, but reaching out to me. I felt it curl inside my head, threading between old memories from my own life. A flicker of shame, a pang of worry, the helplessness I always carried close when the night grew long. I sat frozen, every muscle in my body clenched, listening to the voice. I told myself it was just some kid downstairs, wandering the hall late at night. Maybe someone's television left on, leaking through the old plaster. But the hallway outside my door was quiet as ever, and the duplex only other unit had been empty for weeks. The shadows along the baseboards rippled, just out of sight. I could feel the pressure of eyes, unseen, silent, patient. Not a watching like when someone sits behind you in a crowded cafe, but something deeper, closer. The kind of watching that presses into your bones until you forget the sound of your own thoughts. I couldn't stay in my chair. Slowly, I stood, each floorboard beneath my feet complaining with a groaning, hollow note. I paused at the threshold of my room, hand trembling as I reached to flick on the hallway light. The bulb above whined and flickered, barely chasing away the darkness. The air out here was colder than the kitchen, and every step sounded too loud, as if the house itself had fallen silent to listen. The recitation began again, the same desperate, pleading lines. Please. Let me in. Please. I'm scared. I can't see you. I pressed my back against the wall. I watched the shadows twist at the far end, reaching long and thin into the gloom. Every line of wallpaper seemed to breathe. Something about the space was off, the distance stretched and shrunk. The hallway felt impossibly long 1 second, short and closed the next. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, but the floor seemed to tilt and slide underfoot, just a little. Like the house was shifting to keep me off balance. My hands ran over the aged paint along the baseboards, searching for something solid to hold on to. That's when my finger slipped into a chipped seam near the third floorboard from the end. Years of dust and forgotten grit sifted out, and behind it, something cold and brittle. I pried gently and pulled free an old photograph, stiff and yellowed with time. It shook in my hand beneath the uncertain light. A child stared out, black and white, their smile too wide for the softness of their eyes. The face was strange to me, but the hallway behind them was not, same tilted lines, same peeling wallpaper. I pressed my thumb against the glossy finish, suddenly aware of how thin the photograph felt. I didn't know whose child this was, but I somehow knew, without fully understanding, that this was the voice in the dark each night. Something heavy settled on my chest. I glanced up, the dimensions of the hallway shifting again. The darkness puddled at the child's old spot, thick enough to seem almost solid. Time bent around me. I tried counting my breaths, but every number seemed to slip away as soon as I began. I'd step forward and find myself at the far end of the hallway without noticing a single pace. I'd turn to go back to my room and the kitchen door would seem too close, then impossibly distant. The air tasted stale, thick with a sweetness I couldn't place, almost like the lingering sugar from forgotten birthday cake, but with something sharp underneath. My memories began jumbling. I wasn't sure what night it was anymore. Had I found the photo tonight, or a week ago? When did the voice stop, or did it ever stop at all? Desperate, I tried to change something, to disturb whatever pattern had rooted itself in my home. I dragged the heavy chair into the center of the hallway, hoping to break the ritual. I taped the photograph to the door, thinking maybe acknowledgement would erase the hold it had. I whispered my own name over and over again, grounding myself in the present, in my own body. The voice just continued, softer now, like it was waiting for me to answer. The shadows crowded closer, the light pulsed in and out, until the lamp overhead finally sputtered out. The darkness thickened. I slumped against the wall, wrapping my arms around my knees. I rocked quietly, afraid to close my eyes. I waited for the voice to end, or for morning to come, or at least, for something to change. My mind drifted, untethered. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps besides my own, the scuff of small shoes on the warped floorboards. Other times, the air felt full of whispers, none of them familiar. Hours passed. Or maybe only minutes. I pressed my forehead against the wallpaper, breathing slow, careful breaths, listening for the smallest crack in the pattern of the night. But it all returned, as if on a loop. 12:17, the voice, the shadows, the impossible hallway, the photograph clammy in my palm. The house held me inside its strange rhythm, every sound and silence looping together. Far away, a new hint of dawn threatened to press at the edges of the city, but the light seemed weaker than usual, like it had forgotten how to reach my side of the duplex at all. I promised myself that I'd leave at first light, but as I stumbled to my feet and shuffled back to my room, a slow certainty settled in my bones. The ritual was deeper than the walls, older than the city itself. The clock ticked quietly, just out of sight. I lay on top of the blankets, sleepless, with the photograph pressed beneath my pillow, listening for a child's quiet plea just beyond the bedroom door. My hands won't steady, not really, no matter how many times I fold and unfold them in my lap. The air in the hallway is dense, a little warm from the way I left the heater humming, but the draft that slips under the bedroom door finds my skin anyway. I sit on the hallway floor, back propped against the cool plaster, knees bent and arms wrapped tight, waiting while the minutes bleed slow and sticky across the face of my old digital clock. The clock's red numbers glare at me from down the hallway, ticking past midnight. Every sound is stretched, pale and thin, the house settling, the faint hum behind the walls, the creak of wood beneath my weight. I try not to blink much, just in case. My eyes keep darting down the corridor, searching for a trick, a shadow, some sign that tonight might be different. I have this idea that if I see the source, if I catch it happening, maybe the ritual will lose its shape, and the night will finally return to silence. The wallpaper by my elbow is cracking in strips, curling at the edge. I trace its texture with trembling fingertips. I can't tell if the roughness is from paint or just time. My breath feels too loud, echoing around the empty hallway, bouncing off closed doorways, bathroom, spare bedroom, the locked closet I barely open anymore. The city outside is absent, melted away behind the thick, old glass. I check my phone for the time again. 12:13 a.m. My stomach squirms. The urge to run back to bed flutters behind my ribs. But it's too late to turn away. I wanted to see, I remind myself. I wanted to know what happens when the hour arrives and I'm not hiding behind the bedroom door. I glance at the clock. 12:16, one more minute. The hallway seems to press in, just slightly, as if the air itself tightens to fit the hour. Somewhere in the house, the pipes mutter, maybe from the kitchen, maybe not. I hold my breath, listening for that first word, the faint syllables I've heard every night for almost a week, always the same, always gentle, never moving. Memories stir up, whispers from childhood, the way my mother's voice floated upstairs to tell me it was bedtime, that gentle, careful repetition. But this isn't comfort, not tonight. Here, something terrible simmers beneath the surface of those borrowed words. The red digits blink. 12:17 a.m. The hallway holds its breath with me. Shallow, thin light leaks from the baseboards and limps across the scratched wood floor. For a moment, I almost believe nothing will happen. Maybe I waited for nothing. Maybe the voice will skip, and I will have outlasted it. Then, soft and close, far too close, I hear it. It's time. Come into the hall. Are you awake yet? The voice is no longer at the end of the corridor. It's next to me, at ear level, but when I turn, there's nothing but an empty strip of floor and hallway wall. The words are new. Not the same phrase from every other night. The sense of unease knits itself into the muscles of my arms and back. My mouth opens, words stuck behind my teeth, unsure if answering is the right thing or the worst thing. My voice sounds dry and small. Who are you? I whisper. Silence opens up around me, thick and endless, as if the house wants to listen. The silence feels wrong, fuller than it should be, pushing at my chest. Then a tiny exhale, like someone letting out a sigh just beside my shoulder. It's time to see. Will you join the ritual? The hallway doesn't look different, but the air feels sluggish, syrupy. The floor beneath me, which should have been hard with age, seems to ripple slightly beneath my fingers, almost giving like wet sand. The wood flexes under my palm as I shift my weight, making a soft, hollow knock, like tapping on a door. I look up and see nothing has changed, no flickering lights, no movement, nothing at all except for that dense, almost living quiet around me. From behind one of the doors, my own bedroom, I think, I hear slow, measured steps. 1, then 2, then a pause. My chest tightens. I am certain I locked every door behind me, yet the footsteps move with purpose, steady and unhurried, as if reliving an old habit. I can't move. My legs won't listen to me. The hallway stretches out to both sides, unfamiliar, impossibly long. Shadows lean along the skirting board, not moving but not quite still either. It feels as if the house is inhaling, gathering up these moments, storing them somewhere deep where I can't follow. The voice comes again, now at the level of my knees, whispering around my legs like the draft. If you join, the silence won't matter anymore. It can be quiet forever. The words curl in my gut, sticky and persuasive, almost a comfort, almost a threat. I try to look at where the voice should be, a small shape, maybe, sitting cross-legged where the lamplight fades. But there's only the floor, damp and shifting, the whirls of wood grain bending inward as though to swallow the light. My hands shake. I want to stand and run, but the hallway feels too narrow, too tall, as if pressing me toward an invisible crack in the wall, offering nothing but an endless stretch of peeling paint and cold air. I hear the steps behind the bedroom door again, 3, 4, always the same rhythm. Something in me knows if I open the door, something will be waiting, ready to finish this ritual that started before I ever arrived here. Maybe before I was born. The voice switches, the words sliding across the air as if rehearsed. It's almost time. Just sit here, and listen. Let the quiet fill you. It sounds happy, almost satisfied. The words knot in my stomach. My vision blurs at the edges, the shadows swim. I realize, with sudden clarity, I cannot remember when I last slept, truly slept, not the drifting half-dreams and shallow dozing, but real, deep sleep. I can't remember if I ever did, or if every night has always led to this. As I sit trapped in the hush of the hallway, the sense grows stronger, the building has shifted, subtly. There are more doors now than before, narrow and crooked, lined with dented brass knobs. And from behind each, I hear the faint echo of breathing. Not loud, just enough to let me know I am not alone, not anymore. The house inhales, and I with it, the same rhythm, the same pause. I want to cry out, to run to the front door, but my body protests. My jaw aches with the effort of silence. The house demands quiet. The voice beside me now is right against my ear, a little warmer, as if it's learning to breathe. It's your turn to wait for the hour, it whispers. It's your turn to listen. The lights pulse, then fade, then pulse again, like the beating of some old and patient thing. The walls narrow around me, or maybe I'm vanishing into them. The slipperiness of the hallway increases until I feel myself drift, just slightly, as though the floor is tilting, or my feet are no longer touching solid ground at all. I shut my eyes. I try to remember what my bedroom looked like before tonight. I try to call up the sound of city life, cars drifting by in the deep hours, the bite of cold on my cheek as the window rattles. But the silence inside the duplex presses all of that away, filling my head with the crawling sense that the child's invitation is not a question but an agreement I made without knowing, a ritual I started by listening, by waiting, by staying awake. Now, in the dark, I don't know if I'm still sitting in the hall or if I've become part of it. My arms and legs feel insubstantial, all sensation thinned and stretched. I drift, and behind my eyes I see the red glow of the clock burning on, indifferent. Somewhere, at the far end of this new, endless hallway, I hear another slow footstep begin, and a new voice, breathless with anticipation, asks the familiar, dreadful question, "Are you awake yet?" The ritual turns, and the silence gathers itself, ready to begin all over again.